Cora had been friends with Chelsea since childhood. They went to school together and grew up in the same neighborhood. The inseparable friends graduated from the same college, and even got jobs at the same company. One day the two friends went to a nightclub to relax. They were drinking a cocktail and discussing their latest failed affair. Suddenly a guy with a bouquet of roses appeared before the girls and gave the flowers to Cora. She was confused at first, but then all night they sweetly chatted. Relationships with John developed quickly, and 6 months later he made her a proposal. Cora was surprised, but she really liked him. John was handsome and charming. Having weighed all the pros and cons and listening to her friend's advice, Cora agreed. They invited only a few of John's friends, his mother and Cora's best friend. And a year later they had a wonderful daughter. Time passed and Cora was happy that she had a perfect life. She had a beloved daughter and a wonderful husband, a good job with prospects for growth and many life plans. She couldn't have imagined that it would all be over in an instant. Cora was in a hurry to get home that terrible day. Nothing special, just a lot of things to do and not yet done. A piece of ice from the roof turned her whole life upside down. Cora came to her senses in the intensive care unit. She underwent 2 surgeries and prolonged therapy at the hospital, and only then was she discharged home. Cora was bedridden and could not even sit up. Her daughter was not even 3 years old at the time. Her mother-in-law took her daughter in. Chelsea came to see Cora every day. Soon the woman began to notice how her friend was exchanging some strange glances with her husband and flirting with him. In addition, Chelsea often went out into the kitchen and John followed her. Cora watched them, and to her horror, she clearly understood what was happening. She did not want to believe it, but she was paralyzed, not blind. Filled with tears, Cora asked Chelsea not to come, but her friend only guffawed. After a few months, Cora felt a little better and was able to sit up. Chelsea continued to come every day, but she and John only occasionally went to Cora's room. And in the evening the man always accompanied Chelsea home. They did not hide their relationship at all. Then John hired a nurse for Cora, and he began to spend almost all the time at Chelsea's place. By that time, Cora could confidently sit and move around in a wheelchair. John rarely brought his daughter to Cora, and the woman suffered greatly because of this. Before leaving, the girl always cried and did not want to go back to her grandmother. She wanted to be with her mother, whom she missed very much. In the meantime, John showed himself home less and less frequently. And soon the day came when he announced his intention to leave for good. He did it very cruelly. As a farewell, he said that he has his whole life ahead of him, not like Cora, who has only to wait for death in a wheelchair. After these words the woman could not come to her senses for a long time. She really sometimes thought about why she should live, but at such moments she was saved by the thought of her daughter, and it was the only thing that stopped her from doing a terrible thing. John filed for divorce, and Cora was so depressed by everything that happened, that she meekly agreed and signed all the papers. Soon John married Chelsea, and they were doing well. This news was reported by her former mother-in-law when she brought her granddaughter to her mother. And so today was exactly 1 year since the day she was hit by a block of ice that had fallen from the roof. The woman couldn't control herself and cried. Then she took several deep breaths, as the psychologist had taught her. She did not really believe in all this psychological stuff, but she followed what was recommended without much expectation. Having gathered her thoughts, Cora washed her face, got dressed and decided to take a morning walk in the park and stop by the supermarket. She rarely left the house and most often ordered groceries at home. But sometimes on such particularly sad days she went out of the house to distract herself from her gloomy thoughts. At the door of the supermarket, she suddenly bumped into a man. His tall figure seemed familiar to Cora. She took a closer look. A young face with tired eyes and early gray hair. And meanwhile, the man called her by name. It was Mason, her former boss. He had always been overly strict and picky about the staff. But worst of all, he was always the center of ridicule from Cora and her friend Chelsea. They laughed behind his back at the fact that he lived with his elderly mother, and that as far as they knew he was not even dating anyone. Cora was embarrassed and blushed at the ugly memories. But Mason stopped and asked if there was anything he could do to help Cora. The man looked seriously into Cora's eyes, but there was sincerity and warmth in his voice. Cora whispered that she was going shopping. Then the man said he would help her. Cora herself did not understand why she nodded in agreement. Mason bought everything she needed and helped her take everything home. Before Cora had a chance to realize it, he had sorted out the food and started to prepare dinner. It was obvious that he loved to cook. The dinner was incredibly delicious, and for the first time in recent months, Cora ate with an appetite. At the end of dinner, Mason took Cora's hand, looked intently into her eyes and told her that everything would be okay. Then Mason started to go home. As a farewell, he said that tomorrow he would definitely come to see her. The next day Mason came and brought full bags of food and fruit. Cora had already forgotten when she pampered herself with such delicacies. After dinner they talked a little. It turns out that Mason's mother had died about a year ago. 5 years before that, she had been very ill. All that time her son had been taking care of her. Cora became very ashamed of her words to her former boss in the past. In the meantime, Mason began to come every day, and Cora suddenly began to care about how she looked. She did her hair, dressed more carefully. The woman even pulled out the abandoned dumbbells and began to work out a little at a time. Cora herself did not understand how she so easily and quickly became attached to this man. Perhaps like a drowning man grasps at straws, so Cora felt that Mason is her chance not to go crazy with grief. Sometimes the man gave her flowers and helped her around the house. Several times they walked in the park together. Mason talked a lot about his life. It turned out that he had a fiancée, with whom they had been dating for a long time and were going to get married. But suddenly his mother got seriously ill and there were some issues at work. His fiancée wanted the ease of life, and she left him for another man shortly before the wedding. The other man turned out to be a friend of Mason's. So their fates were somewhat similar. It had been about 2 months since Cora had met her former boss. But she could no longer imagine her life without him. Exercising one morning, she accidentally dropped a dumbbell on her toes and felt a slight pain. She could hardly believe it, and she was impatient to share the news. When the man came, Cora had no time to say anything, because the man was very serious and said they should have a serious talk. Cora was frozen at the thought that he had probably come to say goodbye. But Mason suddenly took a box with a ring out of his pocket and proposed. The woman did not expect such a turn of events and could not move from the pleasant shock. Mason admitted that he liked Cora as soon as she started working for him, but the affair at work for him is a taboo. In addition, then she got married. At that moment, Cora realized that she had fallen in love with the man, as she had never loved anyone. She understood the true meaning of a relationship only with him. He helped her without expecting or demanding anything in return. Cora cried and said that she agreed to be his wife. And then she said she had news for Mason too. She told him how she had felt pain, which meant that she was slowly recovering and she might be able to walk. Mason was happier than he had ever been in his life. He found a clinic that used advanced recovery techniques. Then there were 6 months of hard work and painful procedures. Cora could barely stand the strain at the clinic. But Mason was always there, and the thought of her daughter did not let her relax. Cora wanted very much to get back on her feet, especially now, when hope for a brighter future loomed. And so the long-awaited day when she got on her feet came. Cora walked along the narrow street, leaning on her cane. It hurt, but the woman was glad to be able to feel the firmness of the ground again. Cora was on her way to pick up her daughter. When she saw her mother, the girl broke free from her grandmother's arms and rushed toward her. They hugged tightly, tears of joy flowing for both of them. So daughter and mother have reunited again. Of course, the ex-husband and mother-in-law did not give up so easily, and Cora had to defend her rights as a mother in court, but all ended in her favor. 2 years had passed. A lot has changed in that time. Mason quit his job and opened a small family restaurant. They bought a house in the country. One day, Cora was cleaning the house when the doorbell rang. At the threshold was her ex-husband, and he looked quite miserable. He smelled a booze. He started complaining about life, that Chelsea had kicked him out and that he had to live with his mother, who constantly nagged him. John began to apologize, asked her to come back, especially because they had a daughter. He wasn't even embarrassed that Cora was already married. The woman wouldn't listen to his nonsense any further. She said that she was happy with a faithful and reliable man, and that John would never appear in her life again. When she closed the door behind him, She remembered his words when he left her sick. Life is a boomerang. That same evening, Cora told the good news to her husband and daughter, that their family will have a new baby. Dear friends, write in the comments if you liked the story. Be happy and loved, and see you again.